Hey, this is Professor Triplet, and we are going to model a tree today, or plant, or something like that. We're going to get this going in a few different steps, but in this first step, we're just going to lay the foundation for modeling a tree. So the first thing to do is make a cube. And of course, I would always suggest if you wanted something very specific, go and find reference first, but I just want to give you the techniques on how you could build a tree first. All right, so let's go into our front view, this cube. And the idea is that we're going to use curves to draw some shapes of what the branches or stems of a plant would look like. And then we're going to manipulate those so that they're not flat, because we don't want them looking flat. And I'm going to show a few different ways to manipulate them. And we are also going to make a hierarchy so that we can, if we want to move like the main branch, that the next branch that's connected to it will also move as well. And then after that, we will just go ahead and do some extrude polys on the curves that we've created so that we can start to see what the end result will look like. So let's get started. Okay, so to start off, I like to do freeform. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the pencil curve tool. Just click on this, and I'm in my front view again. And I'm just going to draw out like that. And then I'm going to go like this and draw that out. And maybe draw something out like that. And I'm going to leave it basically like this. Now, if I was doing a full plant, I would probably draw a few more stems separately, but it would just be a repeat of this, but just a little bit different shape. So I'm not doing anything super particular at this point. I'm just basically just getting started, really. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to select these, and I'm going to actually rebuild my curves. And the reason why I want to do that is I'm just trying to lower the amount of control points in it, because if I went and selected one of these and look at the control points, there's a lot of control points because of the way that Maya handles this pencil tool that we're just doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and just reduce those by rebuilding these. So if you go to rebuild and you go to the options, and looks like those might be off screen somewhere. So let me see if I can pull them from my other screen. So here we go. All right, let's close that and reopen it. Apparently it's something with the graphics card wasn't working, so we're going to go to rebuild. Okay, here we go. Okay, so number spans 4, that'll work. So let's go ahead and just hit apply, and you can see my curves look a little bit different now. And now we're limiting the number of curves because we don't want to make it too hard to move things around. Now you can see that if we look from this side, you can see how flat that is, and that's not going to be good for a tree. And a lot of times trees are kind of in a fractal design. So we're going to go ahead, and the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this up a little bit more. All right. Notice that I moved it on the X and Y plane for right now. I haven't decided to actually start manipulating that part of it, but I could at this point. I could start selecting some of these things and just moving these around, considering like where's their end life going to be. And I always like to look at it from the top and the sides and see what the different shapes are going to turn out like. So this is one way that we can manipulate these. Let me just go ahead and grab this. So it's just this simple like hand manipulation. This one I'm going to do like that, move it forward in the Z, and then just kind of curve it a little bit. So that's one way. Another thing we can do is we can right click, go to Control Vert, and I could always double click on, like, let's say the move tool. I'm going to click on it once and then double click on it, and I'll get this the tool settings up, which you also have this right here as tool settings as well, this box right up above here in the upper right corner. And I'm going to go to the soft select, and I can turn that on, and you can see it's turning completely yellow now, and that yellow is represented by this little gradient right here. Okay, and the reason why the whole thing's yellow is because this fall off is really, really high, And so I'm just going to go ahead and turn the fall off down so it's much, much lower. And let's see, like really low. Okay, that's too low now. Let's just make it a little bit bigger. There we go. That's about perfect. So basically what's going on is that the part that's yellow is hot. That's going to be moving 100% with the cursor, obviously, because that's what's selected. And then the part that's orange is like a 50% selection, and then it falls off to 0 by the time it gets down here, which will keep it close to this branch. So you know, because obviously you want it to look like it's coming off that branch. Now it's okay if we move this bottom part here, we could always move it back into place, but if we're trying to do this, you know, without doing that, then we may have to adjust the fall off so that it's not including this last vert. So this little piece right here, I think I want to take this and move it kind of like that. And then I think I'm going to take this and I'm going to curve it in a little bit like so. Maybe curve this out. And so sometimes I might use this and sometimes I might not. Let's turn that down just a little bit more. Like so. You know, maybe I want to move this down a little bit or something. And so that'll do it with a soft fall off. And again, I'm going to look at this from the top. I'm going to say, okay, you know, is that kind of curving? Yes. Okay. Now, let's say I want to curve more. Let's go ahead and go object mode. I can select this, and you can see that my pivot is way down here. I don't want that. I want my pivot actually to be right here at the base. So I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, which will open up the options to move my pivot. And I'm going to go back to my front view. It makes things easier. And I'm just going to start moving this up here. And in Maya, you can snap to curves by holding C and then start moving something. But it doesn't always work, but in this case it is. So I'm just holding C, and it did snap to it, so that's good. That's what I wanted. So now my pivot is literally snapped right at the base there. And then we just hit D to release it. And so now that if I wanted to move this more, I know I can move the whole thing by just kind of curving it like that with my rotate tool. So you can see my rotate tool is going at the pivot point. So now I just rotated it. It stayed right on the original, the major stem, you know, the major part of the plant that's going down to the root, and it just turned along with it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about hierarchy here then. I'm going to jump. I'm kind of jumping because I just went to like rotating and adjusting and now hierarchy, but we're going to come back to adjusting a little bit in a second. But let's just talk about hierarchy. So if I want this object to follow this object, right, I can select one and then hold shift and select the next one. And so if I go ahead and hit P on my keyboard, what I just did was I caused this one to become the parent of these two objects. So you can see now they're both green. When I just select one, both of them turn green. Okay, so if I move this one, look at that, it moves along with it. I can still independently move this like so, but if I move this one, even if I move this one out like this and then I go and move this one again, it'll still rotate along with it. Okay, so let's undo that. Okay, so we want to do that same operation to this. So we'll just select this once, hold shift, select this, and then I'm going to go ahead and just hit P. And so what's happening now is that this is parented to this, and this is parented to this. So if I select this, they should all light up green. There we go. Okay, and you can see that they all move together now. Now what's interesting is if we go to my outliner, we can see the curve has a drop down now, and you can see like there's these little brackets here. Okay, these brackets are indicating that this this main branch, which is the curve 1, that's the first curve we drew, has a hierarchy that's being followed. So you can see that this is a little bit more to the left, and then these are indented to the right. And since these two are on the same level, they are not parented to each other. They are only parented to this top one here. And so they just comes down in the line, okay? Now, let's say I wanted to make another curve, right? Let's go back to my, oops, not the right view, sorry, front view. And let's say I wanted a curve coming off like this. So I can go back to my draw tool and I can just go like that. Okay, and then of course I did a rebuild before, so let's just do that step again and rebuild it. So now it has less points. And now I can do the same operation where I select this and then shift select this, and then I can hit P again and watch what happens in my outliner. You'll notice this is going to change. So this 4 should come underneath the 3 and be indented. So I'm going to hit P. And then you can see now I can expand this out. And now the 4 is underneath the 3 and it's indented. So that means that this is like, let's say this is little brother, and then this is, you know, these are twins, you know, twin brothers, and then this is the mom. So little brother holds on to one of his twin brothers' hands, and then they both hold on to mom's hand, and so they're all connected together. So that's my analogy for today. It's my family analogy. So all right, let's get going. Let's turn this like this. Okay, so we can see now they all move together, right? Let's undo that. All right. So that's how we can basically start moving these around. In a later time, we can think about like, hey, we can, you know, duplicate this whole thing and move the whole network around without losing the ability to even, you know, to like rotate and all these other things. So we would still want to take these and move the pivot. Okay, so for instance, if I go back to my front view, I would still want to go like this and bring this up here, and then hold C on my keyboard, and then snap it to a curve. Try holding C again. Sometimes this doesn't always work the best. Sorry, that was the phone ringing, and it was a junk call. So anyway, so let me hold C again. Sometimes it does not want to snap correctly. So, and sometimes in that case, I'll just go ahead and just basically move it right there at the pivot, and then just hit D. It doesn't have to be super precise, and you'll find out later why. It just has to be close. So let's move this one too. We'll see if we can get this one to snap to the curve. There. Nope. Do it. Again, it's kind of tricky. I've looked for the answer of why sometimes it snaps to it and sometimes it doesn't, but I have never found the answer of why sometimes it won't snap to the curve. So if somebody watches this video and they find out the reason why it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't, please let me know, because I have searched for it, but I have not found the answer. Anyway, what I have found is that sometimes you play around with it enough, like you can sometimes get it to, like in a different view, you might get it to snap, but it doesn't always. So unfortunately, it's just kind of, I deal with it in my own way by just kind of moving in an orthographic view. Anyway, so we can still move these and stuff, and you can see that this branch follows this branch. Okay, let's look at it from the top view. So we might want to do this like kind of in a fractal design where they're kind of like curling one direction. So let's go ahead and go back here. Okay, and I'm going to right click and go to my control verts, and then I can find other ways to move these things around. Now, of course, if I start moving these around and it's affecting too much, then this is actually going to kind of get pulled away from this this curve here, and then it might look a little funny, but we don't have to be super precise. Let's just have some fun with it, and let's go back into our move tool and change our soft select down a little bit, somewhere maybe like that, maybe around there will be good. As you can see, I'm picking it so purposefully so that it doesn't move off the branch. And I can do the same thing here and just turn this up a little bit. Okay, and I can move that a little bit. Now, you aren't limited to just using your move tool. You can use your rotate tool with the soft select. Okay, so, and you can see right there, like I did just basically kind of kill this thing's location with the other one. So I'm going to turn my soft select off. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and get this to snap. We'll be lucky if we do. There we go. D. So sometimes when you try to move these, they actually snap to their own curve. So let's try that one more time. So if I can't get it to go where I want, what I'll end up doing is, I don't know why that popped up. I'll end up going in here and just moving it in orthographic views so that it lines up. And then I'll know that it's actually like on that edge. So you can see here, yeah, now we've done it in like 3 different views. So it should be pretty good. Okay, so now I've just moved that around a little bit. All right, one other way that we can manipulate this is we could take like all of these here and we could just, now notice I don't have this one selected. I just have all of these selected and I can put a deformer on this. So I can just go deformer, nonlinear deformer, bend. Okay, hit apply. Let's see which way this deformer is orientated. So we're gonna just click on curve and middle mouse drag in here. You can see it starts to curve this thing. So you can get all kinds of crazy movements here if you wanted to, just by applying these. Now it seems a little bit cumbersome, but once we have this set up once, we can actually keep repeating the function. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to mess with the high bounds. No, we want the low bounds. Okay, so let's mess with the low bounds and kind of turn that off. So we're only affecting up at the top. Okay, so boom, like that. And let's rotate it like that, like so, and like so. Okay. All right. I mean, aesthetically looking at this, it's not exactly what I want, but it's for the purposes of just showing how you would do this. So now with this selected, I can go ahead and just delete my history. Which is here, delete by type history. I can hit that, and then you'll see the deformer goes away. You can also delete your history here. Delete history, Alt-Shift-D is the hotkeys. So that's important that if you don't want to deform it anymore, you just get rid of that history, and then it'll go away. And you can use pretty much any of the deformers on that. There might be some that don't work, but most of them should work pretty well. So let's see here. Let's close that out and let us go ahead and start doing our extrusions. All right, so as you can see here, this is off of the branch a little bit. That's not really going to matter, and you'll see why right now. So that's why I don't want you to be like too particular. Like just get your stuff laid out and get it so it looks kind of decent. And you like how it looks, and then you won't have to worry too much after that. And you'll find out why right now. So, all right. So make sure that you're in object mode, and then select this, and then go to face. Select the top face, and you have to shift select the largest curve. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit extrude right here. And I'm going to extrude here, or you can go to mesh. Extrude, either one works, and you'll see that it adds in this extrusion that goes all the way to the top. And if I want it to actually look curved, I actually have to start adding divisions in, like so. Now, you don't want to add too many, and you just want it to be so it's nice, you know. The reason why I'm saying don't add too many is because at the end of the day, trees and plants can get very, very heavy in geometry. That's one reason why we're going to keep this basically all boxes like this, and we will actually do like smoothing at render time if we want to like render this nicely within Maya. So, and sometimes you don't even have to. Sometimes you just you know, leave it a box like this and then change the surface normals so that they're smooth, and you won't necessarily even see if this is behind a bunch of leaves. You won't even really notice. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my attribute editor. Okay, so that's this guy here. You can hit Control A, will toggle between your attribute editor and your channel box. And in here, you find in the poly extrude face, you're going to find this taper curve. This is really important. So I'm going to go ahead and just click in this little box here, and this is actually going to allow me to adjust my curve as it goes, so it's going to taper it. You can actually click here and taper the entry point as well, which you really don't need to because it's the same. You kind of want it the same with the base typically, but you can just click more in here and it will just add points. So you can actually kind of control the overall taper of this, like so. Okay, so you want it smooth, you can even change the interpolation to be smooth if you want to. But for this will be fine. It's not a problem. Okay, you can also do a twist. So you can start twisting this thing. And that's actually pretty important because a lot of plants have some twist to them. You don't have to do a ton, just a little bit is fine. You can play with how much it tapers overall, like the global taper of it. And all right, that looks pretty good. So let's just leave this where it's at, and let's hit W or Q to drop that tool, and there you go. We have the beginnings of our branch. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to actually unwrap this next. And I know it seems kind of strange to jump right into unwrapping, but the reason why we do that is because if you unwrap it piece by piece, it actually becomes a lot easier in the end. If you wait and then you start duplicating some of these pieces and reconnecting them and you haven't unwrapped them, you're going to have kind of a nightmare at the end. One thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete this bottom off because we don't need that. And we'll leave the top. And so unwrapping is a new concept for a lot of people, especially in like a beginner entry course on modeling. And so let me just explain what Unwrapping is a little bit. So I'm going to bring up my UV editor. Actually, let's go back. Let's go into here. This is my new UV layout, and this is really nice because this is basically how I work on Unwrapping. I have my 3D view on one side and my flat view, my flat UV view on the other side. So think of UVs as X and Y, right? So here's your X, here's your Y going up, but it's in a flat 2 dimension. So what we're going to basically be doing is taking this 3D model and laying it out in a flat 2D dimension. So at this moment right now, if I was to go ahead and come into this panel here, and I could right click and hold, I can see there's faces, there's vertices, there's UV shell, edges, and UVs. Well, so UVs is kind of a new concept to us. If we go to UVs, you'll see in this viewport, we got sort of these kind of brownish red points that look like they're at the vertices, and they are. And we can select them, they turn green. And then if you come over here, and it's actually a little bit hard to see because we have this edge on here. But it's also selecting points over here. So you can see I just selected this little selection right there, and we've got a bunch of points selected in the viewport. Okay, that's because all these points in our UVs are right now stacked on top of each other. And we don't actually want that, but we're going to fix that in a minute. But I just want to explain that basically, you know what will be probably easy to understand is if I go ahead and grab all of these faces. So I just went to face, I grab all of these faces, and then I just go ahead and I do a planar map. So this little box right here is a planar map, and it's just going to project basically like a UV layout from one direction. And this by no means is a finished UV unwrap, so don't get the idea that it is. But this is basically just taking kind of like, you can actually see it right here. It's taking like this flat plane. You know, they put this little widget tool in here. If you don't have that, you typically have to turn it on over here in the left side of the viewport. But it's basically just taking this flat plane. You can manipulate the flat plane here. You can pull it out like this or make it go like that. It's just projecting like the UVs from one direction, from like a camera direction, basically. All right, so in my channel box, if you want the UVs to be laid out properly as far as like height and width ratio, you should be able to change this to like 20, and the project height and the project width are are then equal to each other. So it should be basically properly laid out. Okay, and let's just say we'll make the scale 1. Okay, there we go. So if I was to look at this from the point of view of this UV, so let me go into an orthographic, and I believe that's the right side. Is that the right side? Yep. Okay, so looking at that from this point of view, you can see that these look almost exactly the same. Only in here, you can kind of see through it that you can see kind of what the back edges behind here. Because it's laying everything out flat. So it's basically like you just put it in a car compactor and squish the car down. And that's what we're looking at right here. So they look almost the same, except for in this view, we can go back to our 3D space and we can rotate around it. In this view, there's no rotating around it. It's just squished. Okay. So there's techniques to lay out UVs so that they work properly, because basically what you want to do eventually is you want to put like a wood texture on here. So like it could be like an image from a branch or from bark, wood bark or something like that. You want to put that on here, and you want it to be rendered on here, either in the viewport or in an end render. Okay, so to do that though, you don't want these edges and these faces and verts all overlapping each other most of the time. You can overlap them technically when you can share UV space between two polygons, but typically when you're first unwrapping, you want to lay it all out flat, and then if you want to share like texture space later, you can. So to lay it out flat, let's go ahead and do that. So we did this planar map, but the problem is that we need each UV at this point to have its own space and to not be laying on top of each other, because it's going to be messed up. Actually, to give an example of that, you can turn on this checker like this, and you can look in here. And so if we have everything done right, everything should look like a nice little, kind of like a checker like that, or like this one. But as you look, you can see like there's weird stretching, and like right here we've got this weird mirroring thing. So you'd like this UV 0 to 1 or 1 0 0 1. It's showing this map on here. So this is what a texture would look like on here at the moment. In fact, I can go ahead and just move this around. You can see, let's put the 1 right on here. So we put the 1 on the base, and you can see it's right there. There's actually 2 of them, because there's one up here and one down here. But you can see how it's getting stretched funny and getting mirrored across. So we don't want that. All right, that's the problem with these things being, sharing the same space and being reversed. So what we have to do is we have to break an edge in this UV view and then kind of relax the UV so that they have their own space. Let's turn off this checker thing for now. This is just to check your UVs. Funny that it's a checker thing that checks your UVs. Haha. Anyway, so let's go ahead and do a simple unwrap of this. So now that we have this planar mapped out, and you can kind of, I explained the concept of what we're doing with our UVs, we can go ahead and unwrap it. So let's go ahead and just hit Q on our keyboard, which will drop that planar unwrap tool. And of course the UVs stick, they stay the way they are, but we want to change that. We want to change their overall layout. So we are going to first come to, let's see, cut and sew. So the easiest way to think about this is kind of think about a long sleeve shirt. Okay, when a seamstress makes a pattern for a shirt, if you think about where you have your seams on your shirt, typically they're under your arm, and then of course you're going to have a seam at the shoulder where they have to take a round, something that's eventually going to be a tube, but it starts off flat as just a piece of fabric, and then they have to sew it together. Well, this is already sewn together, so what we have to do is basically cut the seams. So we're basically going to, think of this as like you have a long arm of your long sleeve shirt, and we need to rip the seam out so that we can lay it out flat. And this top piece right here, we need to basically cut around 3 of the edges so that can flap open, so your arm can be pushed through it. Okay, so let's do that. So what we need to do is select edges first. So I'm going to select these 3 edges. And this might be a little harder to understand at first how that works, but the understanding the rest of it will be actually really easy. So this is going to be the long, think of the shaft of your shirt. This is going to be that. So I'm going to click once here to select this with the shift held. So shift click here. So let's do that one more time. Click these three, shift click here, and then I'm just going to shift double click on this next one. Now what that did, the shift double click on the next one to it, is it went and grabbed the whole loop. So then that way I don't have to individually go through and select every one of these. And you can see in your UV view, this is what we have selected. So you can see the orange one is what we have selected. And now what we want to do is we want to cut that seam. So just hit cut. Not cut tool, just cut. Cut tool is something else. It does similar, but it's not exactly what we're looking for. Now it doesn't look any different yet, but it is. So now what happened is in the UV view, these aren't joined anymore. So if I go ahead and I go to my, you can really go to faces or UVs now. They changed it. You used to have to go to UVs all the time to manipulate UVs, but Maya finally changed that and made it so like you can just select faces. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to relax this into a shape that's basically flat in this scene right here, in this flat space. So I'm basically going to come up and just hit unfold. And look what happened. Okay, so now we basically have this whole branch is unfolded. And you can see this, like, here's that little stick point that comes out there. Now, of course, if this was really just a tube arm of a shirt, you probably wouldn't have anything forming at the end. But, of course, this is not exactly just that. So now I hit W on my keyboard. So I got my move tool up and I have my snap lock on, I think. Where's my snapping? It's somewhere in here. It's I think this is it, right? No, that's just showing the grid. It's got to be this one. Well, somehow my snap is set on. And select face, and because it's snapping to the points, I must be missing where that snap thing is. I have worked in this new UV setup, but they did recently change it, so there's a few tools that I'm not familiar where they are yet because they laid everything out. It's actually much better now, but oh, here we go, the step snap, there it is. So if we turn that off, we can move that without it snapping. Okay, and so I can rotate, and see, it looks like the rotation tool has the snap on as well. So I just went into tool settings, and so I can move it like that. So I like to keep them like straight up and down or something like this, so I can keep them organized. They could be going horizontal too, that's fine. But just so I know what I'm looking at, I try to keep it in an organized fashion because eventually we're going to have a bunch of these things laid out. All right, so there we go. That is laying the UVs out. So I think that's enough for this first section, and in the second section we'll add some new points in here, new extrusions, and just lay out those UVs as well, and then we'll be finished up with this. All right, thanks for watching.